Welcome back to Haunted Horizons, where the shadows whisper and the unknown lurks just beyond the veil of reality. Tonight, we bring you a chilling tale that will make you think twice before driving alone at night. A story of a journey that was never meant to end. This is The Forgotten Passenger. Buckle up and prepare for a ride you won't soon forget. Part 1. The Ride to Nowhere. It was well past midnight when Jake Reynolds pulled onto the long stretch of highway, the road empty except for the flickering streetlights casting eerie shadows on the asphalt. He had driven this route 100 times before, but tonight the air felt different, heavy, charged with something unseen. He turned up the radio to drown out his unease. Static. He twisted the knob. More static. Then, through the crackling distortion, a voice whispered, "Keep driving." Jake's hands tightened on the wheel. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Someone was sitting in the back seat. A woman, pale, drenched, her long black hair clinging to her face like she had just climbed out of a lake. Her hollow eyes met his through the mirror, and her lips curled into a whisper of a smile. Then she spoke. "You should have stopped for me." The car shuddered violently, the temperature inside plummeting. Jake's breath fogged up the windshield as the air thickened with the scent of stagnant water. He gripped the wheel tighter, his pulse pounding in his ears. Then, a soft, wet drip echoed from behind him. Drip, drip, drip. He didn't want to look, but he had to. His rearview mirror was fogging over, a streak of moisture trickling down the glass. His own reflection distorted as the woman's lips moved again, her voice an icy whisper. "You're going the wrong way." Part 2. The Vanishing Town. Jake slammed the brakes, his heart hammering in his chest. He turned, expecting the worst, but the back seat was empty. The radio crackled again. "Keep driving." A cold sweat trickled down his spine. He pressed the gas pedal, desperate to leave whatever that was behind. But as the miles rolled on, the road felt wrong. The familiar signs, the usual gas stations, gone. Instead, old, dilapidated buildings lined the streets, their windows dark, hollow. The headlights flickered, casting brief glimpses of something moving between the buildings. Shadows that shouldn't be there. He passed a street sign. "Welcome to Black Hollow." Jake's stomach dropped. Black Hollow didn't exist. Not on any map. Not anywhere. The streetlights buzzed above him, casting long, flickering shadows. A gas station appeared ahead, its neon sign humming dimly. He pulled in, needing a moment to think. The place looked abandoned, the doors hanging open, swinging in the wind. Then he noticed them, wet footprints, leading inside. And the moment he saw them, the neon sign flickered violently, then died. In the reflection of his windshield, she was back. This time, she was closer. Part 3. Nowhere to Run. Jake's breath came in shallow gasps. He gripped the wheel tighter, his knuckles white. "What do you want?" he croaked. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You left me." A flash of memory. Years ago. A rainy night. A hitchhiker he never stopped for. The guilt crashed over him. She had never made it home. The radio shrieked with static. The streetlights flickered violently, and the car shuddered as if something massive had latched onto it. Jake screamed, swerving the car, but the road beneath him was gone. Darkness swallowed everything. Silence. Then, Jake opened his eyes. He was sitting in the back seat. The car was moving. And in the driver's seat, she was smiling at him. The car wasn't on the road anymore. It was moving through darkness, the headlights revealing nothing. No ground, no sky, just an endless void stretching in all directions. The only sound was the steady drip of water. Drip, drip, drip. Jake wanted to scream, but his voice was gone. The woman turned the wheel, guiding them through the abyss. Her lips parted slightly as she whispered one final sentence. "Now it's your turn." The car stopped. The passenger door creaked open on its own, and from the darkness outside, something climbed in. Part 4. The Endless Road. Jake felt the weight settle beside him. He dared not turn his head, but he could feel it. Cold, damp, and breathing. The woman in the driver's seat didn't react. She simply kept driving into the nothingness. The headlights illuminated only more void, an endless stretch of road that seemed to curve in impossible ways. The thing beside him shifted, a slick sound like something moving through water. Jake clenched his fists, his entire body trembling. Then a hand, freezing, wet, and inhuman, gripped his wrist. The woman smiled. "He's here." Jake gasped as the seatbelt tightened around him, pulling him deeper into the seat. The road outside warped, distorting, and the figures outside the car multiplied. Faces pressed against the windows, faces he recognized. The people who had gone missing over the years. All of them. And now, he was one of them. The car suddenly jerked, the headlights flickering, and then, without warning, the road ended. The car plummeted into the abyss. Jake's scream was swallowed by the dark as everything vanished into a black, watery void. He clawed at the door, the pressure crushing, pulling him deeper. 1,000 whispers filled the air, screams, sobs, names lost in time. Just as he thought he would drown in the nothingness. He opened his eyes. He was behind the wheel again. The road stretched ahead, empty. The neon lights of a gas station flickered in the distance. His hands trembled on the wheel. The radio buzzed with static, and then, through the crackling noise, he heard it. A whisper. "Keep driving." Part 5. The Passenger That Never Leaves. The neon glow of the gas station pulsed like a dying heartbeat, casting eerie shadows across the windshield. Jake gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The figures outside were no longer still. They were moving. The whispering grew louder, overlapping voices merging into a dreadful hum that filled the car. Jake's pulse pounded in his ears. He reached for the door handle, but before he could pull it, the passenger door creaked open on its own. Cold air flooded inside. A hand, wet, clammy, and wrong, gripped his shoulder. Jake squeezed his eyes shut as a voice, her voice, whispered against his ear. "It's time to go, Jake." Part 6. Trapped Between Worlds. Jake felt an unnatural stillness settle over him. The world had changed. The neon gas station was now a distant glow, flickering in and out of existence. The road stretched endlessly, curving and twisting as if it had no beginning and no end. He was stuck in a loop. The woman was gone, but something else was watching. Dark figures stood along the side of the road, their eyes glowing dimly in the unnatural night. They were waiting for him. The engine rumbled, but Jake had no control anymore. The car moved on its own, guiding him deeper into the unknown. Then the whisper returned. "You were never meant to leave." And just like that, the road vanished beneath him. Part 7. The Never-Ending Highway. Jake awoke to the hum of tires on asphalt. The highway stretched endlessly before him, disappearing into the void. The neon gas station was gone. The dark figures had vanished. But he wasn't alone. Something was still in the car. A faint, wet breathing came from the back seat. He could hear it shifting, adjusting, waiting. His fingers gripped the steering wheel, but he had no control. The car drove itself. His foot hovered over the brake, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't press down. The radio crackled again. "You're almost there." A cold shiver ran down his spine. He wasn't going anywhere. There was no there. The road was shifting beneath him, bending, warping. The headlights flickered, casting grotesque shapes onto the pavement. The shadows stretched unnaturally, growing limbs, faces, mouths, opening in silent screams. A green highway sign loomed ahead. The words blurred and twisted before settling into something he could read. "Last exit, nowhere." Jake swallowed hard. He had to get out. He yanked the wheel violently, but the car refused to respond. The headlights dimmed, and the road beneath him began to peel away. The sky cracked open like a shattered mirror, revealing nothing but an abyss. A place where lost souls drifted, whispering secrets in a language he couldn't understand. And then he saw her again, the woman in white. She stood in the middle of the road, her head tilting at an unnatural angle, her lips curled into that same haunting smile. "You've driven too far, Jake. There's no going back." The car lurched forward, accelerating toward her. The engine roared, but the sound warped, twisted into something resembling a shriek. Jake did the only thing he could. He braced for impact. The moment the car hit her, everything exploded into darkness. A sensation of falling, of weightlessness, of being torn apart by unseen hands, and then silence. Jake opened his eyes. He was back in the driver's seat, parked in front of a gas station. The neon lights flickered weakly. His hands trembled on the wheel. The radio buzzed, and a familiar whisper crawled into his ear. "Keep driving." Jake turned his head slowly, hesitantly, toward the passenger seat. It was empty, but the back seat wasn't. A pair of hollow, waterlogged eyes stared at him through the rearview mirror. And then, the door locks clicked shut. Part 8. The Final Destination. The silence inside the car was suffocating. Jake could feel his pulse in his throat, his fingers gripping the wheel so tightly they ached. He stared at the reflection in the rearview mirror, those lifeless, waterlogged eyes, watching him, waiting. The locks had clicked shut, but that wasn't the worst part. The engine revved on its own. The car jerked forward, tires screeching against the pavement. Jake slammed his foot against the brake. Nothing. The speedometer climbed, the neon gas station disappearing into the distance. The road ahead twisted unnaturally, stretching into a dark abyss that seemed to swallow the light. And then she spoke again. "We're almost home." Jake's breath hitched. Home? No, he wasn't going anywhere with her. He fought against the wheel, but his body felt like lead, paralyzed by the suffocating pressure in the air. The whispers from the radio grew louder, overlapping voices, all saying the same thing. "Let go." The headlights flickered, and suddenly, the road was gone. The car plunged into nothingness, weightless, spinning. The screams around him were deafening, not his own, but the voices of those trapped before him. Faces flashed in the darkness, their mouths twisted in silent agony. Their fingers clawed at the windows, at him, at anything that could free them from their fate. And then, silence. Jake's eyes fluttered open. He was standing outside his car. The highway was gone, The gas station was gone. There was only darkness, stretching endlessly in every direction. But he wasn't alone. She stood before him now, no longer distant, no longer a whisper in the dark. Her eyes glowed faintly, her soaked dress clinging to her frail form. The scent of stagnant water filled his lungs as she took a step closer. "You should have stopped for me," she repeated, her voice hollow, emotionless. Jake took a step back. I didn't know. I didn't mean to leave you." She tilted her head. "But you did. And now—" She lifted a pale, trembling hand and placed it on his chest. Ice spread through his veins, burning and numbing him all at once. His vision blurred, the darkness swallowing everything. "It's your turn." The neon lights flickered weakly. The gas station stood silent in the night, just as it always had. A car idled in the lot, its engine humming softly. Behind the wheel sat a woman with long, drenched hair, her fingers lightly gripping the wheel. Her hollow eyes stared ahead, waiting. And in the back seat, barely visible in the dim reflection of the mirror, a new passenger, Jake. His lips parted, but no sound came out. He wanted to scream, to run, to wake up. But he was trapped, just as she had been. The radio crackled to life. "Keep driving." And the car rolled forward, disappearing into the night.